All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Tuesday, January 31st of 2023, already one full month into 2023. Plenty of DFS to play tonight. Got an 8-game NBA slate, and we also have a 3-game hockey slate, right about that time of the week where I start to think about golf lineups. We'll probably be building any golf lineups tomorrow. So if you guys have questions about NHL, NBA, golf, today is always a great day to get your questions answered. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions that come in the office hours channel. In our Discord server, if you're not joined up in our Discord, there's a link in the description below to get joined up. Highly recommend it as always. And if you are just tuning in, have questions, throw them in the live YouTube chat. We will get to all the questions before the end of the show here. But that being said, going to get SaberSim pulled up here. Had a couple questions come in the office hours channel. So we will get to those first, and then we will jump on over to the YouTube chat. So first question here from Elder came in yesterday, and I really appreciate you guys, sending in your questions throughout the day. Makes a big help to getting the show kicked off. Elder said, does SaberSim account for players changing metrics, usage rate, assist rate, etc., when other players are ruled out before the game begins? So I think I know where the spirit of this question came from. Trae Young was ruled out. They were in the last game of the night. And, obviously that opens up a ton of usage, a ton of shots, all of those things. So yes, the answer is yes. We understand, what players are on the court and who's off the court. So, as soon as Trae Young gets ruled out, you could probably see it in the NBA lineup alerts channel in the Discord. You could see him get ruled out, and then you could probably see one or multiple sims kick off. That is us accounting for him now being out. And then basically when we remove him from the available player pool for the Hawks, we now have to understand, who's on the court, how do they play in this situation, who gets the additional usage, etc. So we understand that, the more instances things like this happen, like if there are times throughout the season where Trae Young is, off the court and a certain group of players are on the court, that is just additional data. We understand that we can use that to create new projections based on the new players in the games. So we update projections throughout the night. The only thing we did not update is ownership. So if I was you, like in that situation, and this is something I did myself, which is why I recommend it, I would give it like a little additional ownership to DeJounte Murray in that instance, just because we are not rerunning ownership throughout the slate, but we are updating projections, right? So, Trae Young gets ruled out, DeJounte Murray gets a bunch of extra usage and extra projection. He's probably going to be higher owned in that instance. So I would come in here, if he's at like 8 ownership, give him like a little boost, maybe double it. I think, you don't have to be exactly perfect with those ownership adjustments, but if you can make directionally accurate improvements, that's only a better input to the builder and helps the builder to make good decisions. So if he's like 2% owned and then the news comes out and then you don't change it, that's probably inaccurate, right? He's probably going to be closer 10%, 15%. I think he got up to like 25% yesterday. So by making that adjustment, you're just kind of helping the builder understand all the factors in play. So good question, Elder. Let me know if you need any additional clarification. Benny Hanna said, hi, Andrew. Hello, Benny Hanna. Glad you are able to tune into the show. Ask any questions you have, please. All right, scrolling down here to K Polo. K Polo said, hi, Andrew. Has Mini Uniques been added to late swap, or is it just still in beta testing? K Polo, really good question. Late swap pools are now live in the app. If you were to do a late swap, you would have the ability to adjust Mini Uniques, adjust exposures, change your pool size, do lineup filters and get rid of lineups. I'm just running a normal build right here. We're not in the late swap process yet. I don't have any lineups to late swap, but basically your late swap should look just like a normal build now. If the only thing is, if you want to see how many of your lineups changed and unchanged, that has now moved. So before, it used to be like lineups changed and unchanged, but now that we have the pool and trash columns back, if you just hover over your lineups, it'll say like, lineups parentheses, 20, for instance. If you just hover over that, it could say like, 19 lineups changed, 1 unchanged, and that number should always be the number of lineups that you are swapping. So that is live in the app. Really excited about that. Have had a lot of positive feedback up to this point. So let us know if you guys have any more questions about late swap pools. All right. Interesting question here from Fisty. And Fisty said, Andrew, what are some options for spreading out exposures to groups of players? Say last night I had 50% Luka and 70% of Luka lineups had Rui Hachimura in it. I had min unique set to 4. I can use filters by the 2 players and delete lineups from the bottom of the pool, but that's too time consuming. I still want them together, but not 70% of my Luka lineups. With them together, I guess more control to the grouping of players. Sometimes min uniques does the trick, but not all the time. Okay, so this is a really good question, Fisty. For some of you guys, not 100% sure what we're talking about. I'm just going to kind of demo this for you guys here. So basically what he is saying is like, hey, I have, let's say I have 50 lineups that have, I'm going to use this slate, for example, here. So in my 20 lineups, I have 100% Jalen Brunson, right? If you hit this magnifying icon, you can see how many other players are in the lineup with him. So for instance, I'm going to hit this plus magnifying icon. These exposures are going to update. So what this is now telling me is that I have LaMelo Ball in all 20 lineups with Jalen Brunson. I have Herbert Jones in 9 of the lineups that Jalen Brunson is in, et cetera, right? Because he's in all 20, these aren't going to update, but let's take somebody like DeMar DeRozan, for instance. He's only in 12, right? So if we hit his magnifying icon, he was in 60% of our 20, right? But then this is going to update and it's going to show, okay, I'm looking at all DeMar DeRozan lineups. So he's in 100% of those 12 lineups. And then Jalen Brunson and LaMelo are also in all 12. Quentin Grimes is in 10 of the 12. So this is a way to like see player grouping and see what other players are in the lineups with the one player, with a group of players. You could use multiple filters, right? So if I wanted to do DeMar DeRozan and Jericho Sims, I could do a plus icon on both of them. And then, that number of lineups is getting smaller, right? Now we're only looking at 8 lineups where they're together. But then we're also be able to see the complementary pieces to those lineups, which is still 100% Brunson and LaMelo. So this is a way of like looking a little closer, looking under a magnifying glass at some of your exposures. And it sounds like this is what Fisty was doing. He said, hey, let's say I had 50 lineups with Luka Doncic, and in 25% of those lineups, what did he say? Last time I had 50% Luka. So maybe he has 50 lineups total. 25% of them have Luka, but then 70% of those 25 also have Rui Hachimura. And he's asking, is there any way to kind of control this? What are the best ways of lowering that number, right? So you kind of pointed out the first and most obvious one. So I'll say simplest method. I'm not going to say the easiest method. The simplest method is to say, okay, let's look at Brunson, and then I have LaMelo here, right? They're in 100% of the lineups. Maybe I don't want that, right? So I can just filter for lineups with both of them using the plus icons. I can scroll down here to the bottom, and then I can just start trashing my lowest Saber score lineups where they're both together. Probably before doing that, what I would do is I would go over to my pool. Like if that, all right, I'm already tapped out like on this player combination. I don't want any more of it. I would first go to the pool and then I would bulk trash the pool lineups. So by doing this, I could delete 5 lineups here. I might get 5 more with them together. So I would just bulk trash all the lineups in the pool where they're together and start from there. And then I'm just going to hit fill. Interesting. So that did not work how exactly I wanted it to. So what should have happened, well, actually, hold on, let's go back. So let's go back to the trash. If you ever delete lineups, you just go into the trash and hit this green clear all filters and trash lineups. And then you can put them all back where they were to start. And then you can kind of start over if you ever do something wrong. So what I thought was going to happen is, I have these Brunson and then I have these LaMelo. There's 20 here and then there's 180 in the pool. Okay. So what it is doing is it is taking my lineups as part of the pool. I don't think it should do this. So, if you guys ever see something funny, something looks wrong, just hit a report a problem and then just say my lineups and pool lineups both being bulk trashed. And then our team can look into this and see what's going on. What I expected to happen was that, my 20 lineups are going to be separate from the rest of my lineups in the pool. And I could just bulk trash these 180 if they were different from the 20. That way I could get rid of, 5 or so. And then I would be very certain that more lineups of the same construction would not get into my 20. So I think that is how it should work. I'm going to look into that behind the scenes to see if that's the way it works. But getting back to the example, not getting too far off track here. Easiest way is to come into your lineups and just trim off the bottom of the pool. Point to what I was just talking about. You do run the risk of additional lineups of the same construction being put back in. So that's something you have to look out for. But as far as how to do this in the app, I don't think there's a great way to do it, frankly. What I would suggest is look at the 2 players that you are considering or wanting to limit, and then figure out which one is most important to you and just limit the exposure of that secondary player in that 2-player group. So for instance, if I had to pick between Luka Doncic and Rui Hachimura, I'm for sure prioritizing my Luka exposure. But so then what I would do is okay, maybe I have 40% of Rui, and I'm just going to decrease his max exposure to 20. At least I know that I am limiting him. And then that is probably having an effect on the number of lineups that he is in with with Luka, right? So we could do an example here. I have these 2, Brunson and LaMelo Ball 100%. So I'm going to chop LaMelo to 60% here, and then I'm going to hit apply. And then now if I go to my Brunson, Brunson's still in all 20. Now LaMelo is only in 60%. So I would just try and figure out who the most important one is for you, and then decrease the exposure to that secondary player. Not the best solution. I understand that. Kind of a workaround. Definitely something we've talked about allowing users to do. It is a tricky problem. The really tricky part about it is that, let's say that we did something where it's okay, if I did a magnifying glass on Jalen Brunson, could I edit his min and max exposures for all these other players? Yeah, that sounds really cool and pretty innovative. The problem is if you run into issues, right? If you run into an issue with your lineups not being able to meet exposures, not being able to have enough available lineups, how do you troubleshoot that? How do you go and find it, right? Because here I can see what my exposures are. If I run into an issue, if I have an exposure that can't be met, this box becomes red, right? And it'll tell me hey, couldn't meet exposures. You can come in here. You can see what exposures can't be met. what if you did that to 10 players? Like, you're going to have to go magnifying glass each one of them and try and figure out where the issue is coming from. So because we can't display it really well, that is kind of the technical challenge. They're going to require some innovation and some thought. We're working on some really cool things behind the scenes I can't really talk too much about, but I understand that is a frustration, and I will make a note of that kind of as like a feature request. How would I say it? Player grouping exposures innovation. And I will just take that back to the team, see if we could, put that on the dock to be worked on in the future. Fisty. Dan King had a good question in regards to this conversation. Said, would it be best to set a group rule? The only issue with that, Dan, is that, group rules are all or none. So if I were to do that, if it's like group rule, use no more than one, and then I put, LaMelo and Jalen Brunson, like now they're never going to be used, right? What the rule, what Fisty was kind of saying is like, hey, I want to just kind of limit the exposure of them together. I don't want to get rid of it 100%, but I don't like the fact that they're being used together at such a high rate. So, with lineup rules, it is kind of all or none. There's no way to say like, hey, apply rule to like 50% of my pool or something like that. So that is the reason that does not work. But that is a good question and clarification. All right, moving on. Got a question here from Ferndog. Ferndog said, for late swap, after the initial lock of games, I want to late swap if players are out. So how do I handle the sliders? I have heard that I need to lower ownership fade to 0. Is this correct? And what about the other sliders? What to do with those, if anything? Thank you. Okay, Ferndog, really good question here. So frankly, my advice is that, the slider settings for the contest that you're playing are the best slider settings for that contest, right? So you technically do not have to change them at all throughout the night. Like these are the best settings. I think basketball kind of throws people for a loop with how often you need to late swap. Just think of it as, instead of putting your lineup all in at once and leaving it, you are putting in your lineup slowly throughout the night and taking advantage of the latest projections to build the best possible lineup. That does not change, the amount of correlation you need. That does not change the amount of ownership fade you need. That does not change the amount of sim diversity you need. It is just kind of a more drawn out process, but ultimately leads to the same place of a complete lineup full of correlation aspects, ownership fade aspects, and upside aspects that give you the best chance to win your contest, right? So, do you have to change the sliders? No, you do not. There are, game theory discussions that go on in the Discord and in the industry about like changing the way that you build lineups throughout the night as the night gets longer. So, in regards to this conversation about ownership fade, the reason that, it has been thrown around about decreasing ownership fade is because basically, as the night goes on, right? Like, let's say there's a 5-game slate tonight. This 4 o'clock game locks, the 4:30 game locks, these 2 5 o'clock games lock. And then there's one game left, right? There's a big 2-hour gap. There's one game left, right? Let's say that Nikola Jokic gets ruled out. Surprise rule out. Nobody was really expecting it. Wasn't questionable, right? At this point, the argument for decreasing ownership fade is that you just want to get to the best plays at this point. What ownership fade does is it will judge players based on their projections in the sims and then apply an ownership metric to it. So high owned players get like taxed and then low owned players get a boost. There's an argument for like, hey, at this point in the slate, I just want the best plays. So, don't apply this ownership tax or boost. Just give me like the best possible players that are left. So that's like the argument for decreasing ownership fade, which can make some sense in some instances. I think it depends on like the size of the slate. Like this is a 5-game slate, right? So one single game is 20% of the slate. I think that I would, even if big news like that did break, I would probably still keep my ownership fade on, just because like I am not certain that even if I am doing good, that score is gonna hold, because there is like such a large portion of the game left. I think if it's like big 12, 13 game slate, and this is like the last game of the night, I think there's probably some more merit to decreasing ownership fade at that point. But it's not something you have to do. It's not like a like proven like thing. It's not like late swapping itself, right? Like late swapping is 100% positive EV. It remains to be determined if lowering ownership fade is better than leaving it at the default or not. We haven't done any back testing on that I know of, but it does have some intuitive logic and makes some sense if you hear it, but I don't think it's necessary. So I would just stick with the defaults. If you're not sure, if it's something you want to experiment with, I think that's okay. That is like a conscious decision that you have to make. And, I would encourage you to track the results and see if you get any different results. Run 2 builds, like run a late swap with ownership fade on, and then run a late swap with ownership fade off, and try and, download the lineups, do stuff in Excel, do stuff in Python, and see if you could do some back testing and see if it makes a difference, if that's in your skill set, right? So that's in your skill set, more power to you, but I would just stick with the defaults. All right. Good question there. That wraps. Oh no, I'm sorry. A couple more questions here in the Discord. 2 more to go. D King said, is there a way to set up default filters that will show up as they did before they were removed in a recent update? Okay, yes. So we have like the filter icon here on the home screen. It does reset every day. The reason that we did that was because, regardless of whether this is a 5-game NBA slate versus a 12-game NBA slate, we would just carry over the same default filter to the next classic slate. But we didn't feel like that was right when, sometimes there's a 2-game slate, sometimes there's a 3-game slate, sometimes there's a 5, sometimes there's 8, sometimes there's a 12. Those filters should really be different based on slate context and slate size. So what we decided to do was that there is no more default filter. There is no more carrying over of the filters. What I would really suggest for you guys is, come into your filters, go to add filter, create a filter, right? And then what you do is like, maybe I want to do one where it's like show players with my projection greater than, we'll say 13. I would just name it, I would just say, my proj greater than 13 here. And I'm going to hit save. When I hit save, 1, it's going to apply to this group, but 2, it's going to now come up to this load filters up at the top. And you can see that I have filters that were saved. I also have filters that aren't saved. If you have filters that you use regularly, or if you have filters for different slates, right? You could even do something like that. Like maybe this my proj 13, maybe this is like 4-game slate. And then I hit save, and then you have another filter that is like 8-game slate, and you could save those and load those. So I would really suggest you guys like load those, track those, name them different things, and then when you come into a new slate, okay, how many games are on today's slate? What does today's slate look like? Okay, what filter do I need? Come in here, click the drop down, apply the filter, and then that will be good to go. So that is what I would do. Oh, it looks like that was Dan King's question. So thank you. Yep, happy to help, Dan. And that is kind of our reasoning why we felt like those defaults were too much of a blanket method and wanted to put some more control in the user's hands. But good question. Let's see. Bossman Jr. said, hello, Andrew. I tried downloading my CSV last night into FanDuel and it kept giving me an error. Could you please go over the steps to successfully download a CSV into FanDuel so my lineups are inputted into a contest? Thank you. Okay. So basically what I would do is first I would go over to our help docs. So if you go up to the settings and then you go over to help here, I'm going to just pull this up quickly here, pull up my screen. So this is support, SaberSim.com/support. And these are our help docs, right? What I would do is I would go to this how to fill your entries. This will show you like how to do a CSV, how to upload it. Another way you could do is come into our frequently asked questions, go over to view more, and then up at the top, just type in FanDuel. And then what I could do is, what you could do is like this, how to fill your entries, I think was the right video. So I just wanted to check that. So I would check out that video. That is a walkthrough of how to do it. And then also, just talking about it here quickly. Let me pull SaberSim back up. So I'm going to get SaberSim back up. So if I'm on FanDuel, right, and I have a contest tonight, I think I have a CSV in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come over to the entries. I'm going to come over to this download template file from FanDuel. It's going to pop up FanDuel. It's going to take you to the FanDuel upcoming page. From this page, you can hit the CSV edit button. And then from there, you can download your CSV template. We can't download it for you automatically on FanDuel like we do on DraftKings. Unfortunately, you have to interact with the page to get it to pull up. But you can, but then once you download it, you just drag and drop it here. And then now all of your contests will load in here. So then you're going to, you're going to do your build. You're going to make your adjustments, do your risk management, whatever it may be. I'm just going to match my number of entries here. And I'm going to do a unique lineup for every entry that I have. I'm going to go to fill. I'm going to leave my fill method unique rank. And then I'm going to, sort my contests however I want to sort them. Maybe I want to sort them by size or entries or prize pool, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to hit fill. And then once I hit fill, I'm going to hit this download button. Or I could also hit the download and open FanDuel button. And then if I do that, it's going to take me back to that upcoming page. And then from the upcoming page, I get to hit the CSV edit button on the slate that I'm playing. Be careful if, you're like say you already have entries for like the Super Bowl Showdown, right, on FanDuel. Make sure that you're picking the correct slate. You'll hit the CSV edit button, and then you'll hit, it'll say upload file. You'll hit choose file, and then you can upload from there. So I would check that with that video. Basically just walk through it right here, just while on the SaberSim screen. So if you need a little more assistance, if you're having more issues with it, like come today, I would just shoot us a report a problem link or shoot us an email at support@sabersim.com, and our support team will be happy to help you out. All right, moving over to YouTube chat. So a little feedback here from yesterday, question I answered yesterday. Christian was not happy with my response in full. Christian, I do apologize. I might have come off a little strong there. Frankly, I just was probably a little too strong in getting my point across that, you don't need to worry so much about ownership in these large classic slates. You should not be looking for the lowest owned sum lineups. We should really be trying to shoot for the highest upside lineups, regardless of like some of that cumulative ownership until you get duped, right? I think that is like a key. Like yes, let the builder take into account ownership fade. Let the builder, kind of handle some of that ownership stuff. I really wouldn't worry too much about taking control of ownership until the lineups that you're getting become duplicated in your contests, right? So that is like my own opinion. Maybe other people on like the team or in the community have different opinions, but I don't think that, I think by searching for like lower sum owned lineups that you are probably sacrificing projected points. And in a sport like NBA, you really don't want to do that. And, ownership is usually warranted. I think that the builder does enough to get you like just enough different. Like you're not trying to be, miles different from the rest of the contest. You're trying to be a little different. And it is that like a little different that is going to keep your, projection of your lineups higher, probably keep the upside of your lineups higher, but still allow you to win contests and be different from other lineups in that contest. So, I would really not recommend anybody like go and play, really, really low sum owned lineups. I guess that was really the point that I was trying to get across. But don't overthink this stuff too much. The builder is really good. The builder understands this stuff. I've never been duped in a classic NBA slate, and I don't really think that I'm going to be. But those are my thoughts. Sorry that came across a little strong. But moving on here. Chicken Nuggy said, for NHL, are 6 stacks viable even for this small of a slate? Obviously, if the team goes off, it could get there, but generally seems like it might limit upside. I usually try to follow the in SaberSim we trust, so it's probably correct. I'm getting it once in a while. Yeah, I would say 2 things on this. So one, I would say that the builder is going to give you stacks at a rate that they are viable, but to, something that Jordan talked about in a recent pro video is, and something I've heard Matt say as well, is, sometimes if you're getting a lineup at a really low rate, like an extremely low rate, you got to be a little careful with that. And the reason is that, let's say you're playing Showdown, for instance, like extreme example, make this like easier to understand. Let's say you're playing Showdown here, NFL Showdown, and you have one lineup. Okay, Super Bowl's coming up. Let's think of somebody. Let's say you have like one Boston Scott captain lineup, and it gets in your top, let's say you're 150 maxing. So the one Boston Scott captain lineup gets in your top 150. So you do not know if that is a 1 in 5,000 occurrence or a 1 in 100,000 occurrence. And the reason you don't know that is because it didn't happen again. So it might have just so been that Boston Scott was the optimal captain from, the 5,000 sims that we looked at. But because that never happened again, we don't know if that is, is it 1 out of 10,000? Is it 1 out of 25,000? Like, does it ever occur again, right? So sometimes when you're getting certain constructions at an extremely low rate, I would be okay passing on those just because you don't know if they're going to happen again. But if it is occurring like, more than like 1 to 2 times, I would be more inclined to play that. I would say that, SaberSim is probably giving you that construction at a rate that it makes sense for such contest, right? For whatever contest that you are playing. So, this is a 3-game hockey slate tonight, smaller slate for sure. Right off the bat here, if I were to look at my 6 stacks, come over to stack types and look at how many 6 stacks I have, I have 1.6%, which is 8 out of 500. So, if one of these 8 lineups had been in my top 20 and had made it up there, I would be okay with that, right? Frankly, I would probably be a little concerned if like all 8 of them were up here, right? But if it's like 1 out of the 8, it's like, well, this has occurred, 8 times out of 500. That's about like 1.5%. I would be okay playing one of those lineups, right? But yeah, I mean, those are the things that I'm thinking about when trying to make those decisions as to whether or not to let them in my lineups or not. So I think that, if it's occurring at some frequency in your pool, I'm okay playing it at a similar rate. But if it's like in 10 lineups in my pool and all 10 of them are in my set, I would get like a little nervous. I might dial that back a little bit because the percentage just becomes so more, right? So, if I have 8 lineups of 6 stacks, and then I have, 7 out of those 8, that's 35% of my 20 that I'm playing are of that 1.6% of the pool. So like kind of just thinking about it, in that way helps me kind of determine how I want to handle it. Not the same for everybody, but those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. All right. Good question there. Hockey question. Don't get to talk about hockey too much here. Let's see. Kyle said, thank you. You covered it. Happy to help, Kyle. And then Robert also said, NBA is too sharp to be fading for me. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the big things with NBA, right? Projections are good. Projections are sharp. Ownership is usually warranted for most players. So not trying to do anything too crazy with some ownership, any like some ownership type rules, etc. But good questions there. Okay, that is all of the questions in the YouTube chat. I see one more question here in the Office Hours channel. So if anybody has any questions that they want to get answered, now is a great time to get them in. So going to get this question from Mr. Bugless1 in Discord. Said, NBA Showdown, min unique player. It's set at 1. Is it best to leave it there or adjust to 2 or 3 min uniques? Okay, good question here. So what I would say is this is my opinion, because I've heard different opinions here. But when I am playing any type of showdown contest where I am most likely going to need the optimal score to win, I prefer to leave min uniques off or at 1, let me say instead. Excuse me. So going to run some lineups here for NBA Showdown and going to kind of talk about this, but basically I think that in Showdown, there's going to be a lot of times where you might be a 1v1 swap off of the best lineup. And if you increase this to 2, then there's going to be times where you are blocking yourself from the optimal construction. And frankly, I do not like to do that. I don't want to put myself in a spot where like I could just never get to the optimal construction, right? So that is my big reason for leaving it at 1. I have talked to Jordan about this, and Jordan feels differently about it. He is okay giving up that edge because he thinks that by increasing min uniques higher, that he is going to get a stronger mix of lineups, and what he gains from increasing it is outweighs what he loses from losing those 1v1 swaps. And that's okay, right? To DFS, there's not one right way to play. I would say if you're interested in using min uniques, just understand that as a trade-off and make a conscious decision to give that up. But when if that occurrence happens of that 1v1 swap, you got to be like, okay, well, I knew that coming in, and nothing I could do now. Going to move on to the next slate and stick with my process. So those are like my pros and cons of doing it there. And it is kind of up to the user to decide what is best for them. You're never going to get to like as many min uniques as you can get on a classic slate just because there are less lineup positions. But those are my thoughts on min uniques for Showdown. So let me know if you have any follow-up there. Looks like there was a little bit of follow-up here for the question from Fisty here. Fisty said, yeah, overall exposures to Rui was around 40%. Need to be able to click a bunch of lineups to select them, then delete. It's not a big deal. Most nights the exposures are more spread out. And then Jordan Vigo jumped in and said, always thought it would be the nuts if we could set exposures when a filter was set. Not sure if that's even possible. Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit, Jordan Vigo. If you are catching this, a little bit of a technical challenge, some things that we need to continue building, some really fun things coming down the pipeline for you guys. Can't speak too much about it, but I could definitely tease about it. Team is always hard at work trying to make things better for our users. All right, jumping back to YouTube chat. Question here from Dan King. Said, hey, Andrew, earlier you mentioned something about ownership not being updated, such as in the case of Trae Young last night. Is it set once the first sim is run in the morning and not updated after? Okay, good question, Dan. So ownership updates all the way up until lock. Once the main slate or whatever slate you're playing, like once the slate locks, we do not update ownership anymore. So, if you're playing the main slate tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, once this Miami-Cleveland game starts, we are not going to update ownership afterwards. So if anybody gets ruled out, I highly recommend making ownership adjustments. Let's say Giannis gets ruled out, right? Or we'll stick with our Nikola Jokic example. Or no, let's go Giannis, because this one's kind of earlier in the slate. Will be more opportunities for people to swap. So let's say Giannis gets ruled out, Milwaukee value slate, like come in here and give these guys a little boost. If Drew Holiday's at 15%, bump him to 20, bump Brook Lopez to 20, like give everyone a little bit of extra ownership just because they're going to get extra usage. Their value is going to go up. I think value could be a good indication. If Chris Middleton is a 3.95 value before the slate, and then Giannis gets ruled out, and then he becomes like a 6 value, but he's at 0.8 ownership, you can be sure that he is not going to stay at 0.8% ownership, and his ownership is going to increase. So if you guys see situations like that, I would come into the team and I would adjust the ownership projections. Doesn't need to be science, just needs to be something to tell the builder like, hey, these guys are going to be more owned, and then let the builder figure out what's best from there. Dan said, good to know there. Yep. Happy to help you guys out and show you guys how to get some more edge. It's just accurate inputs, right? That's all we're looking for is more accurate inputs to help the builder make the best decisions for your lineups. All right. So had that question from Dan come in. I think that's all the questions for today, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. If you guys have any thoughts while you're building your lineups, questions throughout the day, throw them in the Office Hours channel in Discord so we can get these shows kicked off with a steady flow of questions while people tune in, while people ask live questions. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be right back tomorrow for our Wednesday show, February 1st already. So looking forward to another good month of this show. And until then, I will see you all. Take care.